Testing, testing. How creepy is the school? Honestly, it's kind of nice just running around freely and there's no one here. So I guess that just depends on your perspective. Have the kids taken over? Surprisingly, no. Maybe they know something we don't. We don't. They're not here either. Or at least I haven't like seen them swarming or anything. Squirrels. I don't see a whole lot of animals. I should go for a run after class and I'll take a look. I'll get back to you. I'm surprised they haven't taken over. All right. Hey everyone, welcome back. We are continuing talking about cranial nerves and the holes they go through, the foramina. Just to remind you, hopefully you already submitted lab check 8 and activity 7. Your lab check 8 and then activity 7 was a workout plan. We'll continue going over the notes because it's related to all the stuff I'll be showing you with the models and everything. You will be getting new groups, so look out for a message from me later today after class. I'll message each group individually. You can all hear me now, right? I think so. The green thing's going on. All right, new groups. We'll go over what you do for the lab check. We won't have an actual brain to pin, obviously, so we'll have to use pictures again, just like we did for the histology. And then I will explain this next activity, which I'll also have to contact you individually about, or send a message with what everyone's assigned. I'll be assigning everyone a different pathway, and then you'll be outlining the pathway just like how I showed you to do it here. Just rub this off. Just like how I showed you to do it here. All right. Any questions before we go to cranial nerve number 5? Questions? There are no questions. Let's go over cranial nerve number 5. We left off just talking about the trochlear nerve. Trochlear nerve innervates the superior oblique. This 5th nerve I have mentioned already. I showed you on a real brain and on this brain too. The trochlear nerve, or sorry, the trigeminal is this very large one. This very large one right here. Just to the lateral of the pons, this one and this one. That's the trigeminal nerve. It's called trigeminal, tri meaning 3, gemina meaning twins. So three twins. There's a total of 6 because you got 3 on one side, 3 on the other. But trigeminal, this is the largest cranial nerve because it's really a collection of 3 smaller nerves. And I do want you to know the 3 branches of the trigeminal nerve. So it's cranial nerve number 5. 5 is V in Roman numerals. The 3 branches are the ophthalmic. Ophthalmic means eye region. Ophthalmic means eye region. So you can see here's the trigeminal nerve, and it branches up towards this eye forehead region. So that's the ophthalmic branch of the trigeminal nerve. This branch goes middle, where your maxillary bone is. So this is the maxillary branch. And then this 3rd branch goes down. That's your mandibular branch. Ophthalmic, maxillary, mandibular. You should know those 3 branches. And we're going to go over each one by one here. Once again, the root comes off of the pons. What is the pons before we go into what each branch is? What is the pons? The pons is that round bulge, this round bulge here of the brainstem. It's because it's at the base of the brainstem, connect to the medulla, but also a pathway up to the rest of the brain. It's kind of an intermediate for pathways that project up and down. Remember projection fibers? Projection fibers that go up and down the brainstem spinal cord? It's kind of an intermediate between all those things, between the cerebrum, cerebellum, and medulla and spinal cord. Those projection fibers can either go up, they can either be ascending. That's going to be mostly sensory information, because when we sense things, it goes up to our brain. Or descending information, that's usually motor output. Starts in the brain and we control stuff out. Somatic, visceral, motor information, controlling our organs, controlling our muscles. In the pons, there's clusters of cell bodies. In the pons, there's clusters of cell bodies. There are nuclei. Those clusters of cell bodies, clusters of neurons, they also help control breathing. Again, the brainstem is for very, very basic controls. Something as vital as breathing. That's controlled by the pons. So pons, in short, intersection of ascending and descending pathways, and has nuclei for very basic things like breathing. Okay, onto the branches of the trigeminal nerve. The first branch, so V1, the first branch is the ophthalmic, O-P-H-T-H-A-L-M-I-C, ophthalmic. Its origin, oh, sorry, let me back up. It's a sensory branch. So we saw that optic and olfactory were sensory. Oculomotor is a motor nerve. Ophthalmic is sensory. So it starts, where is it getting information? It's getting information from your forehead, from your nasal cavity, from your eye, from your eyelid. It's sensing things from these areas. It's not controlling, it's sensing. So that's why I think, Ashley, you asked about migraines around the eye area. This is why I think it'd be affecting this branch of the nerve, because it's sensing stuff like pain and touch. It also goes through the superior orbital fissure. This is the third nerve now going through this hole, the superior orbital fissure, like my new pink. I just colored it with highlighter. Anyways, too proud of this. It also goes to the superior orbital fissure. We just mentioned how the oculomotor and trochlear also go through it. So does this one. So 3 nerves go through one large hole. And it goes to the pons. That's where its first stop is. One reflex, one way to test to see that this branch is working properly, you can do something, you can test out the corneal reflex. The corneal reflex, a normal reflex, is if you touch your cornea. I wouldn't recommend doing this right now or at all, because you don't really want to touch your cornea. But if you touch your cornea, which is the very outside surface of your eye, you will blink. Makes sense. You want to protect your eye. If something touches it, you want to prevent that from touching you more. So you blink. If you blink, it's working great. If you don't blink, then there's a problem. That's the corneal reflex mediated by the ophthalmic nerve. Okay. The maxillary division, second division. This is also a sensory branch. We're sensing things from the lower eyelid, upper lip, and cheek. So it's all this middle portion right here. Inferior eyelid, cheek, upper lip, gums, upper teeth, palate. Remember the hard palate, soft palate, the palate of the mouth? It goes through a different hole. It's called the Foramen Rotundum. All right. Is this too big? So, looking at our skull here, we've seen olfactory foramina here, olfactory foramina here in the cribriform plate, optic canal, superior orbital fissure, and then foramen rotundum. Look for, I don't know how well you can see it, this one right here. Shoot. Sorry, bear with me while I try to stab this through. Right here, foramen rotundum. You can see it on this side too. And I have it sticking out, but it's that hole right here. It's just below superior orbital fissure, foramen rotundum. All right, so that's foramen rotundum. That's the hole that it goes through. And it's, again, the destination is the pons. If you've ever gotten dental work done, let's say you have a cavity, let's say you have a cavity at the top molar, they'll inject you in a branch of that nerve so that you don't feel anything when they're doing work. So when they stick that super long needle full of the what's it called? Something cane. Lidocaine? Novocaine? Probably Novocaine. Yeah, they're aiming for a branch of the maxillary division, a branch of that nerve to help numb that feeling so you don't feel pain when they're working on you. It's called a dental nerve block. Third division of the cranial nerve is the mandibular division. Yeah, Novocaine. It's a Frank Ocean song, right? This is the most inferior. It's sensing your lower gums, teeth, lips, control, and it also, so it's both. It's both sensory and motor. This is what we call a mixed nerve. Mandibular division is it has sensory afferents and has motor efferents. That's what I figured, actually. It does both, sensory and motor. So we're sensing things from the gums, teeth, and lips. We're controlling muscles of mastication. So this is our first nerve where we've gone over a muscle that we've already discussed. Remember the temporalis, remember the masseter, remember the pterygoids? You should know that this branch controls those muscles. You should know that this nerve controls these muscles. Let's focus on the sensory first. So we start in the face and then end up towards the pons. That's the afferent part. The efferent part, the motor part, we start in the pons, the motor nuclei of the pons, and we go exit out to these nerves of chewing. The hole that this motor division actually goes through a different hole. This one here, that was, oh, I can't do it with the mirrored aspect. Okay, this is rotundum. This is rotundum. This is ovale. Rotundum is a little closer to superior orbital fissure. Ovale is oval shaped, and they're all oval shaped, but it's this one here. Oops, this one here, ovale. Mastication, that means chewing, muscles of chewing. Okay. Next nerve. Sorry, 1 second. Okay, let me just reiterate. Would I say ovale is most central? Ovale is pretty medial. Ovale is medial. Yes, Kelsey, ovale is medial. Let me go back to this original slide 5. Just a quick recap. Olfactory nerve goes through the olfactory foramina. Optic nerve goes through the optic canal of the sphenoid. The ophthalmic, sorry, let me go in order. The oculomotor, the abducens, and the ophthalmic, and the trochlear, which we'll get to soon, they all go through the superior orbital fissure. So a lot of nerves, 4, go through the superior orbital fissure. The maxillary goes through rotundum. The mandibular goes through ovale. Rotundum is closer to superior orbital fissure. Ovale is a little off to the side. Actually, you know what? Hold on 1 second. I think I pointed to the wrong thing. Yeah, sorry, y'all. I pointed to the wrong thing. Let me show this to you again. Olfactory foramina. Optic canal. Foramen rotundum. This very large one that's lateral, is ovale. This very large one that's lateral is ovale. It's this one. This medial one is called lacerum. We're not going to go over it yet because none of the cranial nerves go through it. So this is different. This is lacerum. This is ovale. Ovale is left or lateral of it. Ovale. Okay. Cranial nerve number 6. 6 in Roman numerals is VI. Cranial nerve 6 is the abducens nerve. This should look familiar. The word abducens sounds like abduction. When you abduct, you're going away. Like to abduct my glenohumeral joint, I'm going this way. So if we're abducting our eye, that means our eye is going outward. It's moving laterally. The abducens nerve controls your lateral rectus. So if this is my right eye, here's the lateral rectus. If you pull on it, it's going to turn your eye outward. It will abduct your eye. So the abducens nerve controls the lateral rectus. It goes through that same hole as a few of the others, superior orbital fissure. It starts at the pons and controls the lateral rectus. On our brain here, can it be brighter? Here is this little thing just on the rostral part of the pons. That's number 4. That's trochlear. 5 is trigeminal. 6 is, where'd you go, 6? 6 is right at the base of the pons. It's this one here. So 4, 4, 5, 6. Let me point with this again. 4, 5, 6. On our diagram up here, 4, 5, 6. 6 is right here. Here's the pons. It's coming out of the base of the pons, the caudal part of the pons. Okay, it's also a pretty small nerve. It's not as small as the trochlear. It only controls one muscle, just like the trochlear nerve. Abducens nerve helps you abduct your eye, so it controls the lateral rectus. So there are 3 nerves then that control eye movement. There's oculomotor. There's trochlear, which controls the superior oblique. And then there's abducens, which controls the lateral rectus. All right, cranial nerve number 7. Cranial nerve number 7. This is the facial nerve. The facial nerve. The facial nerve is both a sensory nerve and a motor nerve, so it's mixed. It does both sensory and motor. When we're talking about sensation, it's specifically taste. It's the anterior 2/3 of your tongue. So most of your tongue, the anterior 2/3, it's getting sensed by the facial nerve. So it originates there. It goes through the internal acoustic meatus, your internal auditory canal. Looking at our skull, here's foramen magnum. To find the internal acoustic meatus, you want to look over here. See this really big hole? It's not the really big one. We'll get to that soon. But it's right above it. It's right here. That is the internal acoustic meatus. That's the hole that the facial nerve goes through. The facial nerve, as you might expect, also controls muscles of the face. So all those muscles of facial expression that we discussed, controlled by the facial nerve. Your orbicularis oris, orbicularis oculi, oris oculi, frontalis, zygomatic, all those muscles are controlled by the facial nerve. It also controls your salivary glands, 2 of them. Don't worry about naming them yet. Just know that it controls salivary glands. We'll get to these names later. It also controls your tear glands, your lacrimal glands. So it controls skeletal muscles and glands. So the facial nerve is a mixed nerve. It does have branches with names. So there are these 5 branches here. I'm not going to test you on them. So that's just if you want to know how far it branches off. But it's going to all parts of your face, even your neck. Okay. Number 8. 8 is VIII. It's 5 plus 3. 8. It's called the vestibulo-cochlear nerve. It's called that because it has 2 branches. It has a vestibular branch and a cochlear branch. The word vestibular, a vestibule is an open space. Like if you walk into a church and the first opening foyer area, that's a vestibule. So vestibular means, I don't know, I can show you this. Vestibular means it's this organ that has a space, so it's not that descriptive, but it's an organ that helps with your sense of balance. Your vestibular sense is referring to your sense of balance. And if this is your ear, here's the external auditory canal, external acoustic meatus. Here goes my eardrum. See this here? This is the cochlea and the vestibular complex. The cochlea is this, it's been cut in half, but it's this snail-shaped thing, that's a cochlea. The rest of this weird-looking thing with loops and stuff, well, that's the stapes, but the rest of this, that's the vestibular complex. And the vestibular complex helps you detect rotational acceleration or linear acceleration. You know, like that feeling when you're spinning, or the feeling you get when you come to a sudden stop, or when you're on a roller coaster and you just feel that weightlessness. It's because of your vestibular complex. Your vestibular complex has a nerve that branches along with the cochlear nerve. So here's the vestibular branch, here's the cochlear branch. And I don't know how this goes in. There we go. So here's the cochlea, here's the cochlear branch, here's the vestibular organ, here's the vestibular branch. And they exit out the internal acoustic meatus. And they help with sense of balance. And the cochlea, that's, sorry. The cochlea is for hearing. This is your organ of hearing, the cochlea. So, vestibular cochlear nerve is a sensory organ, a sensory nerve for balance and hearing. Balance is the vestibular branch, hearing is the cochlear branch. It goes through the internal acoustic meatus and it goes towards the pons and medulla. Let me count them off for you again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 is here. Here's facial, lateral of pons, but caudal of trigeminal, and then 8 is a little more lateral of that. 7 and 8 are right next to each other, which makes sense because they go through the same hole. 5 is up here, 7, 8. 5, 7, 8. Okay. So these nerves go to the pons and medulla. We haven't quite talked about the medulla yet, so let's talk about the medulla. What is it important for? It's important for a lot of different things, and they're all vital for these autonomic reflexes, reflexes that we don't have to think about. It's autonomic, it's automatic. Autonomic nervous system is controlling it. All projection fibers have to go through the medulla, so the medulla is essential for that. Remember the medullary pyramids? The pyramids, if you look on the ventral side, it's just these midline structures that go up and down. So on this diagram, it's these midline structures that run all the way up and down. Those are white matter tracts. Diagram, it's hard to see where I'm pointing at. I can do that in a minute. Or Ashley, if you go to slide here, if you go to slide 30, here's a good diagram, and I can redraw it. Okay, what I'm going to draw here is what Wendy Riggs drew. So thank you, Wendy. We're looking at this inferior aspect of the brain, looking at the ventral side. First one, we see those bunny ear things. That's cranial nerve 1. Cranial nerve 1 ends at the olfactory bulb. Let me draw. Here's a corpora quadrigemina. Here's the pons. And then here's medullary pyramids. And here are the olives. Let me try to label that. Pyramids, olives, pons, corpora quadrigemina up here. So cranial nerve 1, let me use a brighter color. Cranial nerve 1, olfactory nerve, that's the only nerve that doesn't go off of the brainstem. Cranial nerve 2, that's your optic nerves. They form an X. It's here. There's cranial nerve 2. Cranial nerve 3 is just coming out of the midbrain. So let me draw it with Cranial Nerve 3 is coming out of the midbrain, like around this area. So I'm just going to draw like one thing here and another thing here. That's Cranial Nerve 3. Cranial Nerve 4 is a little more lateral. Still by the pons, but a little more lateral. Cranial Nerve 5, the trigeminal nerve, is very thick and just like completely lateral of the pons. 6 is what we're on now, right? 6 is more, it's more like just center between the pons and medulla. So, like right, that's thin. 6, VI. 7 and 8. 7 and 8 are pretty lateral and at the base of the pons. So 7 would be right here. 8 would be right here. We'll go over 9, 10, 11, 12 coming up. Right. So, where were we? Pyramids. Those are the projection fibers running along the midline of the brain. Those are medullary pyramids. There are many nuclei also. So pyramids are white matter tracts, it's axons, but there's also nuclei, cell bodies of neurons found in the medulla. And they're important for a lot of different things. Things like motor learning, like basic motor reflexes, sound processing, which is why, as I've just mentioned, the cochlear nerve will go towards the medulla. So we'd have initial sound processing in the olives. The olives are the round bulges of the, oh, are you kidding? No sound? It says I can, according to the green thing at the bottom. Andrea, how about now? So the olives are these round things. See that round bulge here on either side? It's these round things at the base of this part of the medulla. So they're round, they're bulged because you have a collection of cell bodies there. Those oval bulges lateral of the pyramids. It does other basic things. It regulates your heart rate, regulates your blood pressure, regulates digestion. It's all coming from the medulla. It's associated with other cranial nerves. So we've talked about the vestibular cochlear nerve going to the medulla. We'll mention other nerves that go to the medulla that help mediate these different things, like heart rate and blood pressure. Okay. More about the vestibular cochlear nerve. More about the vestibular cochlear nerve. The vestibular branch, that's, again, here's your vestibular apparatus. This organ here is your vestibular apparatus with these funny circular things. We'll get to what those are later. But your vestibular apparatus, that is the organ of balance. We sense balance. It sends output, or input rather. We're getting sensation. Sends input along the vestibular branch of the vestibular cochlear nerve. Two different areas. It can send information directly to the cerebellum, Remember, our cerebellum is important for coordination and balance. It can send information to the vestibular nuclei in the medulla. So there are special nuclei, clusters of cell bodies, in those olives of the medulla. From there, it can send information to your eyes. Because if you have a computer chair at home, put your family member in the chair and spin them around and ask, and then have them spin around and then stop them suddenly and look at their eyes. They should be like doing this weird movement thing. It's called saccades. But anyways, it's controlled by this. Vestibular nucleus controls those muscles of your eye. We can send information to the reticular formation, to the thalamus, to the cerebral cortex, so that we have a conscious processing of what our balance is like. So thinking about our balancing, that would go up all the way to the cerebral cortex. So you can see how this information can diverge in many different ways. We can do different things with this information. If we sense our bodies moving in a certain way, we can automatically balance ourselves. We can control our eye movements. We can think about what our balance is like. So there will be many branches, many different pathways from that one set of information. Just depends on what it is we're processing. The apparatus, the vestibular apparatus, helps you with your sense of balance, like linear acceleration, like stopping and going in a car, or vertical, like going up and down an elevator, or spinning, rotational acceleration. That's all with the vestibular apparatus. The cochlear branch. So again, the cochlea is that snail-shaped thing next to the vestibular apparatus. The cochlea is our organ of hearing. We have one on either side. That sends auditory information to the medulla. Remember, we have those cochlear nuclei in the medulla and the olives. From the medulla, it then goes to the. It can go to the cerebellum because we can use hearing for our sense of balance. It can go to the cerebellum, or we can go to the midbrain, to the thalamus, and then to the auditory cortex. So we can take multiple stops: medulla, midbrain, thalamus, auditory cortex. This is for processing the sound. This is for balance. Cerebellum is for balance. There can be some decussation, but there's some contralateral processing, but there's also in ipsilateral processing. How can you use hearing for balance? Try this in a room where you know you can walk around safely, and have a family member, whoever, like jingle their keys around. If you close your eyes and you hear someone jingle their keys, you can locate it. You can locate the sound. But let's say you hear, not keys, but let's say a ball. You can hear the ball bouncing. You can hear the ball bouncing, which means it's bouncing off of things in your environment, and you can sense that, okay, if I hear the sound at a certain pitch, it's this close to me, and then I can like maneuver myself. It's kind of like echolocation, almost. You can use hearing for your sense of balance. Just knowing your surroundings and knowing how to navigate through your environment. One more thing I want to show you about this hearing pathway that's not shown here. Remember when we went over the eye, how you have a photoreceptor? That's the actual receptor that detects light. And then it communicates with the bipolar neuron, and then it communicates with the ganglion cell, which forms the optic nerve. Photoreceptor is neuroepithelium. When we detect things with hearing or with a vestibular sense, so both hearing and vestibular sense, there's a special cell called a hair cell. I'll draw like this. This is a hair cell. A hair cell has these hair-like projections on its apical side. These are stereocilia. Do you remember when we went over stereocilia at the very beginning of the class? Stereo means there's directionality. So these hair things, they can fold in one direction, but they can't go in the other direction. So when a fluid pressure wave hits them, they can bend in this direction, but they can't go in the other direction. They're hair-like things that bend in a certain direction, stereocilia. When we hear things or when we balance, it's all about pressure waves. All sound is waves in the air, which causes waves in our ear. So when we hear things, or even when we balance, when we're spinning, when we're going up and down an elevator, it's just pressure waves that bend these stereocilia. The stereocilia of the hair cell, this hair cell is a neuroepithelium receptor. It then communicates with a sensory neuron, or this is going to be bipolar, a sensory neuron that then goes to the medulla. So just imagine that this goes to the medulla. Sensory receptor cell, sensory neuron. Two different things. One's epithelium, neuroepithelium, one's nervous tissue. That is the cochlear branch. So we have a cochlear branch, we have a vestibular branch, both of the vestibular cochlear nerve. More about the midbrain. We've mentioned the midbrain before when we talked about the superior colliculus. We never talked about the inferior colliculus. Doppler effect, I'll talk about in a second. The inferior colliculus, these two bottom bumps, that's important for the auditory startle reflex. Superior was for the visual startle reflex. So if you see something that's scary, that makes you flinch. Auditory startle reflex, that's if you hear something that makes you flinch. So if I go like that and you flinched, sorry, not sorry, whatever. I hope your ears are okay. If you flinch, that's mediated by the inferior colliculus. Inferior colliculi, plural. Doppler effect, if you mean like why does it sound different, that's more of a physics thing about the thing that's traveling far away. But let me go back. I said that you can control, or sorry, when you sense hearing, information from the right cochlea can stay on this side. It can also cross over to the left. Information from the left side can cross over, or it can stay on one side. That means in each auditory cortex, we're getting information from both ears. What our cortices do, what these auditory cortices do, they compare the information. And when we hear the same sound at two different times, it tells us which way it's coming from. So by having this information cross over, we can, it's milliseconds, it's very quick, but we can sense that slight difference. We can process that slight difference and say, okay, if there's a slight difference in this direction, the sound is coming from over here. This slight difference in the other direction, sound's coming from over here. So I think that's what you mean, Ashley. Hopefully that answered your question. Okay. Take a moment. Waiting for your answers in the comments. Let's see what you all think. I want to see what everyone thinks. Type in an answer. Just to clarify, I'm looking for what wouldn't result. So 3 of these things would result from damage to that hole, internal acoustic meatus. 1 of them will not. So I need the exception. A, D, okay. For those of you that said A, drooping of the face. If your face is drooping, that means we're lost control of facial muscles. If you lost control of facial muscles, that means it's the facial nerve. Muscles of facial expression are controlled by the facial nerve. The facial nerve passes through the internal acoustic meatus. So that would be affected. So the answer is not A. Your face would droop if you damaged the internal acoustic meatus. What else does the facial nerve do? It also has taste, so it's also sensory. So A and C are both things that would happen. D would also happen, a loss of balance. The vestibular cochlear nerve, so the vestibular branch of the vestibular cochlear nerve also goes through the internal acoustic meatus. The best answer here is B. Can someone tell me what nerve and what foramen would be mediated by B? Pain and sensitivity to the lips. Any guesses what nerve mediates pain and painful lips and sensitivity? Yeah, the mandibular and maxillary division of the trigeminal. So, whoops, not this one. Maxillary division goes through foramen rotundum. So if we damage rotundum, then the upper lips would be affected. Mandibular division goes through ovale. That one would be affected. So maxillary and mandibular divisions of the trigeminal nerve, that's what B is referring to. Whoops. Yeah, B, painful sensitive lips. That would not be affected. Next question. Great. So we're not responding to clapping or loud noises. So that is part of hearing. Hearing is processed in the medial geniculate nucleus. I don't think I pointed that out earlier, but this is in the thalamus. So this is for general hearing, but specifically for this reflex would be the inferior colliculus. General vision goes through the thalamus of the lateral geniculate nucleus, and visual startle reflex, the superior colliculus. This is auditory startle reflex. The answer is D. Great job. All right. We've gone through 8 cranial nerves. We have 4 more. We have 4 more. They go by a little quicker than the other 8. They don't have as many branches as the others do. All right. Cranial nerve number 9. 9 in Roman numerals is IX. It's 1 less than 10. IX. Cranial nerve number 9. Glossopharyngeal. Prefix glosso means tongue. Pharyngeal means your pharynx, your throat, back of your throat. Glossopharyngeal. So it is also a mixed nerve. It's both sensory and motor. The sensory part is for the tongue. The motor part is for swallowing. Let's talk about the sensory part. Remember the trigeminal nerve is for the anterior 2/3 of the tongue. No, not trigeminal, facial. Facial nerve is for the anterior 2/3 of the tongue. Glossopharyngeal is the back third of the tongue. Glossopharyngeal. So it's also for taste and touch. Somatosensory means touch, temperature, and then taste. It goes to the medulla through the jugular foramen. All right. So here is this medial one is lacerum. This outer one is ovale. So here's ovale. Foramen magnum. See these very large holes back here? That's the jugular foramen. The largest one lateral of foramen magnum. This is the jugular foramen. Compare that with the internal acoustic meatus, internal auditory meatus. That's right here. Internal auditory meatus, jugular foramen. So the jugular foramen, you might have heard of the jugular vein. The jugular vein does go through that same hole. So blood vessels and nerves go through this hole. The jugular vein is the major vein of your neck. Right. So it goes to the jugular foramen, the sensory part, as well as the motor part. So we're sensing taste for the glossopharyngeal. We're also controlling swallowing. It starts at the medulla, lateral to the olives. So number 9. You can see the olives right here. This is an olive. Lateral of that, here's 9. 9 and then 10. We'll get to 10 next, but 9's right here. 9, then 10. What are we controlling? We're controlling, we have 3 salivary glands. 2 of the salivary glands were controlled by the facial nerve. 1 of them is controlled by the glossopharyngeal. Don't worry about naming the specific one yet. We'll get to that later. But I just want you to know that it controls salivation. So glossopharyngeal nerve controls 1 of the salivary glands. It also controls the muscles of swallowing. We didn't go over any specific muscles of swallowing, but remember what I want you to know about the muscles of swallowing. They either attach to the hyoid and or the thyroid cartilage. A hyoid is that floating bone. Thyroid cartilage is found in your larynx. They're usually attached to one of those so that you can move your tongue and move the muscles of your throat, of your pharynx. Shown here is the glossopharyngeal nerve, innervates the tongue for taste and touch, innervates salivary gland and also muscles of swallowing. Excuse me. Vagus nerve is regulating most of your parasympathetic nervous system. Most, not all. I know we haven't talked a whole lot about the parasympathetic nervous system. Hopefully what you do recall is that it's part of the efferent division. It's part of the autonomic division, which is part of the efferent division. Efferent means output, and you can either control skeletal muscle, that's somatic motor nervous system, or you can control smooth muscle, cardiac muscle, lots of other things. That is the autonomic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system can be branched into sympathetic and parasympathetic. Sympathetic is your fight or flight response. Parasympathetic is getting things back to normal, rest and digest. So these nerves, the vagus nerves, extend from the brainstem and can go to all over your body. It can go to your throat, it can go to your heart, it can go to your lungs, it can go to your stomach, it can go to your intestines. This is your longest nerve, longest cranial nerve. Cranial nerve 10, the vagus nerve, Vagus, V-A-G-U-S, not like we're going to Las Vegas. Vagus nerve, this is your longest nerve, helps control most of your parasympathetic nervous system. It tells your stomach to start digesting. It tells your intestines to start moving. It tells your pancreas to release fluids. It tells your heart to slow down. It does those type of things. It is both motor and sensory. The motor portion starts at the pyramids, lateral of the pyramids, I should say, starts lateral of the pyramids, and then controls muscles of your pharynx, muscles for speech, controls your lung, or muscles of breathing, I should say, controls muscles of breathing, controls your heart, controls your stomach, intestines, digestive organs. Goes to your jugular foramen. It is also sensory. It senses things from those same organs. Like it lets you know how distended your stomach is. It lets you know how inflated your lungs are. So it can regulate those different things about your digestive, respiratory, cardiovascular systems. For instance, there's in this major blood vessel, your carotid artery going up to your head, your brain, you want to know what your blood pressure is. You want to know the level of oxygen and carbon dioxide in your blood. And that's sensed by the vagus nerve. So the vagus nerve is really, really important for these basic autonomic functions. Just to show you where it's coming out of on our diagram here. So this is the medulla. I've really exaggerated these drawings here. These are the olives. These are the pyramids. They're not really that big, but anyways, I've exaggerated. Just lateral of the pyramid, between the olives and the pyramids, that's where 8 and 9, or 9 and 10 are coming out of. So 9, IX is 9, and then 10, which is really long. 9 and 10 are right next to each other, coming out of the medulla. They go through the jugular foramen. Okay. The vagus nerve also is for taste. So when I said sensation, you're sensing things from all these abdominal digestive organs and respiratory and cardiovascular. You're also sensing taste. So altogether, when we taste, and the word for taste is gustation, gustatory is taste. Anterior 2/3, that's your facial nerve. Anterior 2/3. Glossopharyngeal, that's a posterior 2/3. The very, very back of the tongue, most posterior portion of the tongue and throat, that's taste for your vagus nerve. Whichever nerve you're getting it from, the sensation, it goes to a nucleus. Don't worry about the name of it. It goes to a nucleus in the medulla. From the medulla, it goes to the thalamus, because remember, the thalamus is an important relay station for taste, vision, and hearing. It's what we've seen so far, taste, vision, and hearing. We have a stopover in the thalamus. And then from the thalamus to the gustatory cortex. The gustatory cortex is partially in this temporal lobe and also this insular cortex. Remember the insular cortex? It's found there in the temporal lobe. The medulla, thalamus, gustatory cortex. Number 11. Number 11 is the accessory nerve. You might hear it called the spinal accessory nerve. It might actually help you to think of it as the spinal accessory. The reason for that is, if you look at the base of the brain, if you look at the medulla here, it's actually, you could argue that part of it is on the medulla and part of it is on the spinal cord. Here's the thing. it's this, all of these little things here, starting from my fingernail all the way down here. It's all these little branches. So it's this flat set of axons coming out. Once again, all of these. 9 was up here, 10's over here, 11 is all, this is all 11. Spinal accessory. Accessory nerves, they're controlling your throat and neck muscles. They originate at the medulla/spinal cord. They go through the jugular foramen as well. So accessory nerve number 11 also goes through the jugular foramen. It can control muscles of your soft palate, so the very, very back of your throat, your pharynx and larynx. It also controls the sternocleidomastoid and trapezius. So those neck muscles for turning your neck or flexing, sternocleidomastoid, trapezius in the back, controlled by the accessory nerve. You should know these muscles and what they're controlled by. Sternocleidomastoid and trapezius are controlled by cranial nerve 11 accessory nerves. 9 and 10 are coming in between the pyramids and olives. 11 is the most caudal. 11 is the most caudal. Oops, that's 11. 11 is coming out of this most caudal part of the medulla/spinal cord. Last one. Cranial nerve 12 is called the hypoglossal. Hypoglossal, let's break that word down. Hypo means below. Glossal, remember, means tongue. So it's controlling below the tongue. What are we really controlling? These nerves innervate the base of the tongue to help control its movement. So hypoglossal is a motor nerve. It's not sensory, it is not for taste. The hypoglossal is a motor nerve controlling tongue movement. It starts in the medulla between the pyramid and olives. It goes through the hypoglossal canal. Let me show you here. Foramen magnum, jugular foramen, really, really big. See that really small hole here? This one? That's the hypoglossal canal. It's the smallest one right lateral of the foramen magnum. That's hypoglossal. Another one is right here. Hypoglossal. So originates at the medulla, goes to the hypoglossal canal, controls muscles of your tongue muscle. I think, let me edit my drawing over here. I drew it a little off. Yeah, sorry. Give me a second while I edit this. All right, let me try that again. What I did incorrectly, what I drew here incorrectly was 9 and 10. 9 is lateral of the olives. So if this is the pons, here's the olives of the medulla. 9, 10. So 9 is IX, 10 is just X. Glossopharyngeal vagus is lateral of the olives. So it goes 9, 10, 11 is down here. 11 is the most caudal. 12, you have to go back up and in. Twelve is between the olives and the pyramids. Hypoglossal. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, or sorry, 10, 11, 12. One more time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I'll probably take a picture of this and post it to that Google Photos Drive thing. Oh, right, and this. Olfactory nerve, cranial nerve 1 ends here at the olfactory bulb, so we'll call this 1. 2, 3, sorry, let me get to it. 3 is above the pons. 4 is a little more lateral. 5, the largest cranial nerve, thickest one. 6 is inferior of the pons, caudal of the pons. 7, we go out lateral again. 7 and 8 are right next to each other. 7, 8. Go to the medulla. 9, 10. 11 is all the way down the medulla. And then 12 is in between the olive and pyramid. 12 is right here. This is 12 sticking out between the pyramids. This is the pyramid. Here's the olive, this rounded protrusion. Okay? It's going to take some time to remember where each one is. So that's why it's not going to appear on the next practical. The next Wednesday's practical will be, or Thursday's is going to be not this, but it will be on the next one. So you have some time to go over it. Of course, as always, you'll need to review, and I'll give you as many resources as I can so that you can review from home. I'll be making a video of these nerves later. Right. How can you remember all of this? Mnemonics help. Mnemonics help. If you want to remember the names, here's a mnemonic for you. There's a bunch out there. You can make up your own. Here's our order, 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way to 12. So it's O, T, T, A, F, V, G, V, S, H. This is assuming you say spinal accessory. But anyways, O, to touch and feel, very good velvet. Such heaven. That's one way to remember it. Another way to remember it, rather than just the names, it's by function. Remember, some nerves are only sensory, some nerves are only motor, and some nerves are both. So if we put a B here, that means it's both sensory and motor. Trigeminal is both, because you've got all those branches in them, and one of them is mixed. Facial is both, glossopharyngeal is both, vagus is both. And then the others are either sensory, or only motor. Here's our mnemonic. Some say merry money, but my brother says big brains matter more. If you want to make it even more memorable, you can replace the V with a different word. You can replace the B in brains with a different word. I'll let you use your imagination. Yeah. But those are two mnemonics. Well, you have to be insane to learn this, right? There are some mnemonics for you to help you remember. I've included some more things here. If this drawing helps you, great. Like these things are to help you remember what each nerve does and where it's located. I'll let you look at this on your own. Wendy Riggs went over this drawing. Hopefully this helps you. Here's a really neat drawing. Let me sketch it out for you so you know how we got to that in the first place. Where can I draw it? Okay, cranial nerve 1, that's smell. So there's cranial nerve 1. Cranial nerve 2, that's vision. Cranial nerve 3, that's moving your eyes. Cranial nerve 4 is also moving your eyes. The superior oblique. So is cranial nerve 6. I'm going to skip the 6. Cranial nerve 6 is the lateral rectus, abducens. What did I skip? Cranial nerve 5 is trigeminal, which is controlling lots of things in your face or sensing things in your face. Cranial nerve 6, we did that. Cranial nerve 7 is your facial. Cranial nerve 8 is hearing and vestibular sense. Cranial nerve 9 is taste and swallowing. Cranial nerve 10 is vagus nerve. So that's your longest one that goes all the way down. Cranial nerve 11 is like you're shrugging, like your sternocleidomastoid and trapezius. So 11. And then 12 is moving your tongue, hypoglossal. There. That's how we got that picture there. So whatever way helps, go for it. These are just some ways to help you remember all these different nerves, where they go through, what they do, whether they're sensory, whether they're motor, whether both. Yeah. I'll give you a second. Let's call this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Tell me which nerve is being tested in each picture. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Which nerve is being tested in each picture? Take a minute. And to be more clear, like this first one, it might be testing more than one nerve when you do this. So more than one nerve can be tested with the same test. If you have your answers, go ahead and put your answers in the comments, in the chat. So if you think 1 is cranial nerve 1 olfactory, which it isn't, then just go ahead and say that. I want to see what y'all think. It's not. It's not that. Anyone? Anyone? I'll give you 1 more minute. Or okay, here's a few. Okay, the first one, we're testing a couple things, several things. We're testing vision, like 1, can you see the finger? So that is testing cranial nerve 2. I suppose you can also imagine that they're moving their eye or moving up and down this way, so you have to focus on the eye and follow the finger. Sorry, focus on the finger and follow it. So that means you need your oculomotor, you need your trochlear, and you need your oculomotor, trochlear, and abducens. So you need optic nerve, oculomotor nerve, abducens, trochlear. All of that is involved with that first picture. Nerve 1. And so that's what a doctor is looking for when they're making you follow your finger around or focus on something. This second picture, you're trying to resist the person pushing down on your shoulders. So you're trying to shrug your shoulders up. You're trying to elevate your acromial clavicular joints, which means you need your trapezius. Which nerve controls the trapezius? That would be the 11th. What is it called? Accessory. There we go. Accessory nerve. That's a test of your accessory nerve. This one here, it's opening the jaw. It's depressing the mandible. Muscles of mastication. Which muscles control chewing? Control mastication. We need, anyone? Anyone? No, there's a lag. Eight is for hearing and vestibular sense. Yeah, it's a trigeminal nerve. So it's the 5th nerve, the 3rd branch. Yeah. So we're opening our mouth. That's a muscle of mastication. That's the trigeminal nerve. Here, sticking your tongue out. Which one is that? Sticking your tongue out, that is hypoglossal. So 4 is 12. Sticking your tongue out. 5, 1, 2, 3, 4. This 5th picture, we're puffing our cheeks out. Does anyone know which muscle we're using to, like we're blowing a trumpet? Which muscle is that? The muscle we're controlling is the buccinator. Great, which means if that's a facial nerve is number 7. So test for your facial nerve. Ow. Finally, we're just touching someone on their cheek, seeing if they feel it. Which nerve would you need for that? For feeling something on your cheek? This would be, hopefully you guessed trigeminal, great, the maxillary division. So all these little things we can do to test for our nerves, just to see if they work properly. So a normal test, someone touches me with my eyes closed, because I don't want to know that they're touching me. I can just say that, yeah, you touched me. That's great, it works properly. But if you touch someone here and they say, I don't feel anything, well, then there might be something wrong. There could be something wrong with that cranial nerve. That's why we do these tests. Simple things to assess whether or not a nerve is working properly. Can we move our tongue? Can we feel something? Motor or sensory, it doesn't matter. There's a test for it. Take a moment, read the question. Great. The jugular vein would go through its namesake, or I don't know which way is which, but anyways, here's a jugular foramen. So the jugular vein and 3 other nerves go through the same hole. That would be the glossopharyngeal, vagus, and accessory nerves. They all go through that same hole. So if there's a swelling of the jugular vein, it would affect functioning of those other nerves. Great. I get this question a lot, so I thought I'd make it a question. Take a moment. Tell me what your answer is. There's several nerves involved in the gag reflex. I'm specifically asking about motor, so keep that in mind. What is for the act of gagging, not for the sensing of gagging. All right. So, why is my brain blanking? So the major muscle for controlling your throat, like your pharynx and your larynx, that is your accessory nerve. That's your accessory. I'm checking my notes real quick. I feel like, did I not ask this the right way? Could there be more than one answer? No, you know what? I feel like there is more than one answer. Okay. I should have asked this better. Here's what I should have asked. Specifically for closing your throat. The act of closing your throat, that's vagus. So the answer really should be B. Closing your throat, that's a vagus nerve. B. Accessory nerve is involved in muscles here, so it does relate to muscles of swallowing, for instance, same as glossopharyngeal, but the closing of the throat would be vagus. Hypoglossal is tongue movement. Hypoglossal is tongue movement. Cool? Okay. Cool. That's it for the cranial nerves. Let me discuss what we have left. Once again, you will be getting new groups. I will message you. I will message each group, letting you know who you're with. You can meet each other virtually. Hopefully, you find a way to contact each other regularly, whether it's through text or email or otherwise. If you can, do like a Hangout, like a Google Hangout. I don't know. I think you have access to Zoom now. Zoom's being nice and letting people use their stuff. Oh, that reminds me. I want to. I feel like 2 meetings a week isn't enough. So if you want extra practice, since we can't meet for Open Lab, I think I'm going to hold like at least 1 weekly game hour or something. Do you all like that? A game hour where we play games through the internet? Have you all been doing that? I played some code game with people, with my friends through a chat thing. So we'll download Zoom. If you don't have Zoom already, get Zoom, because I'll be moderating it through Zoom. Let me get you the link for it. Let's just go to zoom.us. Resources, where are you? Download Zoom client. Copy link address. This one. Yeah, so bingo will be one, and then bingo is one thing I want to do, and then I have this cranium game. I don't know if you've heard of the game Cranium, but in previous classes we've made our own cranium sets that apply just to anatomy. So we'll play that too. So bingo and cranium are 2 thoughts I have, and I'm talking to my TAs to help make more things. So if you haven't downloaded Zoom, download it. You can even, if you don't have a video camera, you can still even join by phone. So yeah, you can still join in either way, whether phone or with a webcam. Okay, let me talk about the lab check. Your next lab check, go to lab check 9, assignments, then lab check 9. You'll obviously have to submit it online. So just like this time, take pictures of your things, or I never know where to stand with this light. Take pictures of your drawn piece of paper or type stuff out and send that to me, whichever way works for you. And send in your explanations. I see that there are voicemails, so I'll go check that. Whatever's in the lab book, answer it as I've asked you to do it here. Resketch something, label something, answer in complete sentences, whatever. For the brain pinning part, unfortunately, you can't come here and label the brain directly. So what I'd like you to do is go to Google Photos or search anywhere on the internet for an unlabeled picture of the brain, the appropriate unlabeled picture of a real brain, and label it just like you did with the histology. Put arrows. I want an unlabeled version with arrows, and a labeled version with the arrows and the labels, just like with the histology last time. So person A is labeling all of these different things. Person B is labeling a bunch of other different things, and so on. So I want you all to find unlabeled pictures of the brain, which check the Google Photos page. I uploaded a bunch of new ones there. You can use the ones on Google Photos. You can use ones that you find on the internet. As long as they're unlabeled, you can use them, and I want you to label them. Have an unlabeled version with leader lines, and then a labeled version with the leader lines. Any questions on the lab check? Oh, when is it due? It's due, I guess we have spring break next week, so it's due when you come back. Either the Monday or Tuesday when you come back. Come back, you're not going anywhere. It's gonna be a fun spring break. I've all gotten started on cleaning. I cleaned out like my whole car. I vacuumed. I actually plan on getting one of those steam cleaners. Hopefully Home Depot's open. I'm pretty sure it's open. I think I need to rent one of those steam cleaners and clean the fabric. A lot of time to clean. We're gonna try different group snarches. I want you to start talking to new people so that you extend your network of support. I want you all to get talking to different people in the class. So it'd be great if you could still talk to people in your previous group and talk to new people. Wait, Corey, can you seriously hook me up? Clean. Spilled coffee, use a steam cleaner. And I think that's the best thing I would use. You would need some good cleaning solution and really hot water. Any more questions about the lab check? And Corey will talk later. Questions on the lab check? Okay, that's the lab check. That's going to be due after break. So you got a lot of time. I don't know if anyone can actually go anywhere. So yeah, I'm not going anywhere. Lab check 9 renew group. That's right, Mackenzie. I'll be emailing you after class, after this meeting, who your groups are, and that way you can talk to them and divide up the parts. When can you expect the email? Within the next hour. So hopefully by 2 o'clock. It's 1:20 right now, 1:22. Okay. Bear with me here for activity 8, and I'm just gonna throw it all in also with activity 9. Remember how? Yeah, actually, you'll exchange it in your messages. So I'll ask you to exchange it there. Remember how I showed you? Like I showed you this olfactory pathway. You smell something, starting in your olfactory epithelium, it goes to olfactory foramina, blah blah blah. Makes it. Let's say we smell something and it reminds us of our childhood. That's a memory. So for a reminder of our childhood, we remember something that leads to the hippocampus. So that sensory pathway, the afferent pathway, we started the olfactory epithelium, made our way to the hippocampus. That's one part of our pathway here. What I want you all to do is come up with an example like I just did. I thought of something, I smelled something from my childhood, and write out that situation. So for my sensory part would be smelling something from my childhood. I'm writing this down so you all see. Thing reminds my childhood. Okay, when you remember something from your childhood, let's say this is a happy memory. So I smelled something, reminds me of my childhood. Because it makes me happy, I smile. Like that. To smile, you're using muscles, facial muscles, zygomaticus, and so on. So for my motor efferent pathway, I would use my facial nerve. So I would want to draw out my facial nerve pathway. Smiling because I'm happy. What I want you all to do, based on ones that I give you, based on situations, I'll assign you one. Come up with a situation that would pair a sensory pathway with a motor pathway. They don't have to meet up together. Like the sensory pathway ends at the hippocampus. The motor pathway, the facial one, starts in the medulla. So they don't start. The afferent one doesn't necessarily end in the same place as the motor. They don't have to match up perfectly. But I want you to come up with 2 pathways, a sensory and a motor, that match up nicely. Jose, I haven't. I'll have to take a look at that. So I need to assign each of you a pathway, which I will, again, be doing that in the next hour. If you go to activity 8, there's a ton of numbers here. A lot of information is here. For example, let's go with this one here. Number 4, we're starting with photoreceptors in the retina that then communicate to bipolar cells, that then communicate to ganglion cells. The optic nerve passes out the optic canal, crosses at the chiasm, follows onto the tract, and then it stops here in the superior colliculus. Pathway number 4 stops in the superior colliculus. That means this pathway is a visual pathway, part of the visual startle reflex. There are other visual pathways for different things. This is for general visual processing, stopping the visual cortex. We're stopping in the superior colliculus, so this is for the auditory or visual reflex, visual startle reflex. So this is if you got shocked by something, if you saw something and got shocked, or you flinched or whatever. So I will assign you all these different ones based on the one that I assign you. I might assign you a sensory one, I might assign you a motor one. I want you to come up with a situation where you're using both sensory and motor. I want you to do your best. So I want you to send me a rough draft by Friday. I want you to send me a rough draft by Friday. It's not graded, but you'll want to send this in so that I can give you feedback. It'll be due after spring break. So I want your rough draft by Friday. It'll be due after spring break. Once again, I will email you. I will message each of you. Your draft is due Friday. Final after break. Give me a second. I have a really good example of one. It's in the hallway. I'll be right back.